Hello again. Welcome to another version, excuse me, of Kaz's Corner video. Today we're filming in the office of the South Sider Voice, the very best little weekly newspaper in the entire world. I'm a little prejudiced because two of our former employees, lovely ladies, are running this business and they're just doing a wonderful job. But today in our studio is a face familiar to many, many Hoosiers, Reid Duffy. Welcome to Kaz's Corner.
Well, thank you for having me.
I think you're probably best known for your Duffy Diner extravaganza.
It's the primary source of my infamy.
Yes, and I was always amazed. You are one tremendous salesman to talk a company into paying you to go eat a free meal.
I did not talk them into it. I had no idea. They did this on TV back in, was it 1978, I think in April of 78. What happened was Channel 6 at the time was owned by McGraw-Hill, the publishing company. They had about 5 stations around the country, and one in San Diego was doing a restaurant review segment on their newscast. And it was a very popular segment of all the different kind of oddball segments they did. That was the most popular. So they decided to try it, in Indianapolis. People thought I'd be done in about, 8 weeks. They thought you could get all the restaurants in Indianapolis in a pamphlet,
In those days, you probably could have.
Well, it did not have a great reputation for its restaurants in terms of variety. There wasn't a lot of ethnic restaurants, not a lot of Asian and European style restaurants, pretty much meat and potatoes. And it didn't seem to be a lot of them, but they decided to try it, and it just took off. People were kind of amused that I did get paid to eat by the station. The restaurants didn't pick up the tab, the station did. We treated it like a kind of a news report, and we ran it once a week under the Duffy's Diner logo. And it just hit at the right time. All of a sudden, all these chain restaurants, these quality chains, theme-oriented chains started coming into the market. And people just started getting interested. The downtown Indianapolis was just starting to develop, and they were just more interested. The social life of the area picked up quite a bit. And part of that social life was going out to restaurants for couples and so on. So it just hit at the right time.
This is a late night compliment because those were some years back, but I was always taken by the fact that you were so at ease, you were consuming food, which is not necessarily a beautiful sight.
No, especially when I was doing it. I kind of attack food, like a tiger on a wildebeest sometimes.
But you were so laid back and you did it so casually, and it was like the viewer felt like you were sitting at his dining room table at home and having dinner.
We kept it comfortable. Of course, you shoot it roughly a week in advance, and you edit things down.
Sure.
So if I did drop stuff off my chin, we made sure. I'd be over the photographer's shoulder sometimes because I made sure that he, because they took great delight in those type of little mishaps that I would have, and so I had to make sure it didn't make the show because I didn't necessarily trust some of them on that score. But we kept it light. I tried to bring some humor into the situation, especially at the end with the dessert. I pretended like I didn't eat the desserts.
Well, now, it was supposed to be non-influence in the sense that you didn't pick a restaurant that happened to advertise with Channel 6.
No. Well, first of all, restaurants don't advertise on television much because it's too expensive, especially independent restaurants.
Right.
That's the one advantage chains have is they can get that television promotions from their major company. But restaurants just generally didn't advertise on TV anyway, at least the major stations, because it was just too cost prohibitive for most of them. So we didn't really worry about a conflict in that situation.
Reid just recently spoke for a business group that I belong to Thursday morning, and he told some success stories. Tell about some of the restaurants that, for instance, you were in one where you didn't know it, but they had planned to close in 2 weeks.
Right.
And after your appearance, kaboom, it took off.
I was told by at least 2 restaurants, I kind of saved their lives in effect just by exposing them and telling people where they were in some cases. There were 2, they claimed that both times I called, they were in the process, literally that day, of talking with a realtor, talking about selling the building or just getting out of their contract because nobody was coming to their restaurant. One was a Greek restaurant in the Broad Ripple area that had taken over a place that was originally built to be an ice cream store, and the owner ran out of funding, so the store never opened, but it still had some of that kind of cheery red, white, and blue decor, anything that did not suggest it was a Greek restaurant.
Not too Greek.
And he named it after himself. Well, he didn't quite have the Greek-sounding name that suggested what it was, so people just didn't know what it was. He didn't have the money to advertise very extensively. And so I did a review not knowing what the circumstances were. I just was doing it because it was open. I needed to do a restaurant. And people started coming, and he made a go of it, and has done very well. He's been open probably about 20 years now. And another one was a restaurant of a young couple that opened up around the farmers market area. The farmers market had closed. They found a building that was affordable for them, but there was no much activity around there, walk-in trade, that kind of thing. Nobody ever hung around there at night, not because it was dangerous, there's just nothing to do around there. And so she was actually talking, the guy was, she was chatting with him at the time when the phone rang, and said, yeah, and all of a sudden people started coming, really liked their food. It was an Italian place, and they eventually moved to New York Street, and they've been open, 20 years now. So you feel good about helping somebody out like that, even though you're not doing it for that purpose necessarily. You're doing it for the viewers.
You also mentioned the practice of assigning stars, 2, 3, 4, and 5, etc.
Yeah.
And tell me the reason that you stopped doing that.
I didn't like the idea because, I don't know, you just put an opinion in people's minds. They wanted something that people could grab onto, a 4-star. Oh, I got to go to that. I usually gave out 3.5 to 4 stars for most restaurants. 5 was my ultimate perfection, pretty much. And if I gave a 3-star, it's good, but there's places that do it better, was the basic theme I had on that. And I remember going to one restaurant that it was on Keystone Avenue. It had been a home food or home cooking type establishment at very low prices, and had a lot of appeal for folks, especially older folks on fixed incomes, like going there. They were very loyal. So a couple bought it. He was a chef, and he was from Europe, and he wanted to open a German restaurant. There had hardly been any German restaurants in the area at the time. But he got kind of caught up. He was still getting the customers from the previous restaurant who were expecting a low-cost meal and kind of an American low-cost meal. He's trying to introduce German food. He was trying to keep the cost down to keep these customers, so he was maybe getting more inexpensive cuts of meat than he would have preferred to get to do the dishes he wanted to do. And I went there, and I thought my meal was fine, but the people I was with didn't care for it that much. So I wound up giving it 3 stars as being average. And I get a call the next day from the woman, the wife of the chef, who was quite upset with me, and said that we shot this in November, so the Christmas season's about upon us, and 2 groups that had staged Christmas parties there, or arranged for Christmas parties that December, canceled out.
Oops.
And I felt bad about that. I felt, this is not what I want to do. I don't want. So I talked to stations, look, I don't want to do that kind of carved in stone assessment, because each day is different. I'm only ordering 1 meal. I really can't make that kind of super judgment as to the day-to-day quality of a restaurant. So I just wanted to treat it like a report. Here's
Sure.
what they serve. Here are the prices. Here's what I thought of my meal on that particular day. And they stayed open a good 7 years after that, so it wasn't a disaster for them. They eventually moved to Brown County, had a very successful restaurant in Story Inn.
Oh.
And they made a success out of that.
Oh, yes.
He was also at the Athenaeum for a while and brought that restaurant out of the cobwebs, and made that a consistent success story of recent years. So his name was Frank Mueller, and he was a very good chef, but he was just getting started in owning his own business, that kind of thing. So I'm glad they survived my tepid review.
Your death.
And so nobody canceled out their Christmas parties.
I judge the eating establishment by the look on your face as you consume the meal.
Yeah, it's I guess. I mean, I never sneered at anything.
No, but it was really tasty. Your eyebrows would go up, and those sort of. And it's a natural reaction. You were excellent in doing that because, again, you made the viewer feel like you're just sitting at the dinner table with them.
And I didn't trash restaurants. A lot of people criticize me for not being more demanding of a restaurant, But I felt I'm only going there once, and you just can't give that kind of assessment. I really found a horrible experience. God, this food is awful. I can't eat it, kind of thing. I usually found the restaurant maybe suffered in comparison with other restaurants doing the same thing and maybe doing a little better or a little bit more imaginatively.
Can you repeat for our viewers the oopa surprise?
Oh, yeah. There was a restaurant on the south side of Indianapolis, whose name I can't remember. They didn't last very long. It was a 24-hour restaurant with a Greek-American theme. And of course, you go to some Greek-American restaurants or a restaurant that's sort of an American restaurant owned by a Greek. He has 9 million items on that menu. He's got Italian, he's got this, he's got a huge, it's like reading a Russian novel sometimes. And so I went there, and anytime I went to a Greek restaurant, I always got this appetizer called saganaki. It sounds Japanese, but it's a brick of cheese, usually goat cheese, and it's kind of soft. And they pour liqueur on it and then set it ablaze and bring it to the table with the fire, and they pour lemon on it to douse the flames. And while they're doing it, they're going, opa, which I think is Greek for the cheese is on fire or something like that. And it's a very tasty dish. You could spread it on pita bread and that sort of thing. But I always ordered it because it involved flames. And I knew the producers at the station wanted any story you could give that had flames in it. They couldn't get enough of that. And so, I ordered the saganaki. The waitress who was bringing it out to us was a young waitress, very, very attractive. And had kind of a bouffant hairdo. She was a nervous wreck. Matter of fact, she was on TV. She drew the short straw and had a serve-by party there in front of the camera, so she wasn't too thrilled about that, I could tell. And now she's got to serve this saganashi dish. And it's a very, it's a kind of a tense dish. I've been to a lot of restaurants that they're not used to serving it. The waitress, they're very nervous about it. Others, have no problem. Matter of fact, one guy up in Lafayette that owned a Greek restaurant said he could do 7 at a time.
Oh, boy.
He was from the Chicago area, and he liked doing it up his arm. So it looked like a bonfire coming up to the...
Be surprised if sprinklers didn't go off.
But I digress. Anyway, so we kept her waiting because the photographer wanted to get the shot and get it on the first take. And so he's setting it up very carefully. She's sitting there waiting, very nervous. She's got the tray in one hand with the cheese, and it's doused in a liqueur. She's got a Bic lighter in the other hand. So we tell her to go. She sets fire to it. This has a little bit too much of the liqueur in it, and the flames almost hit the ceiling. And on the way up, her hair catches fire. It just bangs. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And what cracked me up about it later was this look on her face, this kind of exasperated, eye-rolling look, like, oh no, not again. And so she puts out the flames. She wasn't hurt or anything, but there's little wisps of smoke now. And she's utterly mortified, just totally embarrassed and mortified on TV, and so I had this big moral dilemma. What do I do here? Do I show the whole thing, which the producers would love to have, or do I save this girl a lot of ongoing embarrassment by showing the whole thing? So we edited it in such a way where we saw the flames come up to here on her, then a cutaway shot of me going like this, and then the flames going back down. And the upshot of the story I tell people is that the restaurant in question eventually burned to the ground, like several weeks later.
It did, in fact.
It did burn to the ground, yeah. I don't know if it was an arranged fire.
Maybe he was trying 7 of them.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I told people the fireman never pinned a cause, but I think I know what might have happened, So that was just one of the crazier stories that we had.
Let's talk a little about Reid Duffy. You're born and raised in Chicago.
Right.
Went to Croca School.
Right.
Went to Notre Dame.
Right.
Why?
Because my dad went to Notre Dame. That's the only place he'd send me. It's amazing I got in. I wouldn't get in today with the grades I had. I had decent grades, but now you got to be a valedictorian, it seems.
And 50,000 a semester.
Yeah. Well, my dad was a contributing alumni, shall we say.
I see.
And so I think that helped me a little, kind of that legacy thing going. I can only assume, but I had okay grades, and I went to Loyola Academy up there, a Jesuit school, which had a good reputation for being college, training kids for college kind of thing. That's what they pushed, so that probably helped a little bit. A lot of kids out of Chicago area went to Notre Dame, and so I got in. I was very thrilled to be in. Wasn't the most socially great place, but that's why I feel the Manti Te'o situation with the imaginary girlfriend situation. That's kind of how I remembered it.
There were girls on campus. You had to go across to St. Mary's?
Yeah, St. Mary's. I think I was one of the last graduating classes with an all-male graduating class in about I don't know what it was, 70, 71, they started admitting girls, as well they should, and I wasn't one of those crusty alumni that said, no, we can't have that. But yeah, I was there from 63 to 67, and all the girls I met there were pretty much imaginary, so I don't know what the big deal was about.
I think all of them
Teo.
were getting ready to become nuns, weren't they? All the girls from St. Mary's.
Well, no, they wanted Notre Dame guys. That's what we always convinced ourselves of. Yeah, that's the only reason they went to St. Mary's. But yeah, there were a lot of imaginary girls. They all just kind of, especially when I asked them for a date, they just vanished in thin air.
Maybe it's to their advantage. Talk about the Cubs. You're a long-suffering, loyal Chicago Cubs fan.
Yeah.
Like my wife always says, they're coming back.
They're coming back.
They're coming back.
This is their year. Yeah, I was born a Cub fan. My dad was a Cub fan, and that's you have to make a decision very early in life between Cubs and the Sox, and you cannot be for both.
True.
That's
true.
just out of the question.
You never snuck into Wrigley, did you?
I mean, so White Sox Park?
No. Did you ever sneak into Wrigley?
No, I always paid for it.
Did you?
Yeah, it was cheap back then.
Yeah,
you get it for
$2 bucks, not whole gang.
Well, I went to the All-Star game there back in 1958. That was during that period when they had 2 All-Star games, and the second one was designed to get their their retirement program off the ground for the players. So I actually went to it, and I actually got in. I didn't just stood in line and got into the bleachers. Those were the days, you know, you can kind of do that sort of thing. And Cubs didn't have all that many sellouts. They did okay, but I just take the L and go see a game.
I was raised in Lafayette, and we used to listen to the Cubs game. Burt Wilson, whose famous line was, "We don't care who wins as long as it's the Cubs."
As long as it goes. Burt was a little before my time. I honestly don't remember. The guy I remember was Jack Quinlan. And Quinlan went to Notre Dame. He was my favorite baseball announcer. He was a very talented baseball announcer. And tragically, he died in 1964 in a car accident during spring training.
Really?
Yeah, and he went to Notre Dame. And I actually went to his funeral. And he happened to live in Evanston, and it happened over a spring break period, so I happened to be home. And I just went over to, partly maybe to see who would be there, you know, that kind of, I just went to the funeral mass in Evanston. The station WGN that he worked for put out a scholarship, roughly a $500 scholarship type thing in his name, and I actually won the scholarship because I happened to be in. Really? I happened to be the sports director of the student radio station. I had no idea you could even apply for it. And the guy who was in charge of it, the head of the communications department, gave it to me, and that was really a big thrill. I can imagine. It really was. I mean, it wasn't a super lot, especially at Notre Dame. I think it took care of about an hour's worth of tuition, but it was kind of a thrill for me, and it kind of and I got to go to a game. WGN invited me to go to the game and be in the booth and all that, and it really triggered my interest in broadcasting even further than it was.
Well, talk a little more about that. What trail left you to Duffy's Diner and today's position?
Well, in 1970, I came to Channel 6 in 1971. I had just come from Champaign-Urbana. I did graduate work.
Were you a communications major at Notre Dame?
Yeah. And then I was a radio and TV. I got a master's in radio and TV at University of Illinois, which I got because it didn't require a dissertation. That helped. Otherwise, I don't think I'd have it right now. But I did that for 2 years and then worked at the public radio and television station there, WILL, which was one of the first stations in Illinois, I came to find out. And then I came to Channel 6. They had an opening for a State House reporter. And I replaced a gentleman named Jim Green, who was very highly respected. And so I covered the State House, the state legislature when it was in session, and I covered politics. And from time to time, I'd have some fun with the political end of it. That
would be quite a difficult job. I mean, the intricacies of politics and this guy and that guy and knowing who's connected.
It's very difficult. It's difficult to explain to the people because the legislative process is kind of a meat grinder, and you know where the bill is.
Lobbyists.
But it came at a time when the legislature really opened it up to the media for TV. You could actually film their sessions on the floor. You could film their committee meetings. The committee meetings used to be closed. Then they got a new batch of senators and legislators in there, a little sharper group, I think, than some of the characters they used to have. And they opened it up to television, and I came in right at that point. So we were very busy. And I covered that pretty hard, and I really enjoyed covering politics. And there's two kind of reporters, those that love politics and those that despise it with all their heart. So you get a kind of a niche like that. And
I suspect you encountered some love-hate relationships too, didn't you?
not particularly. I always respect the guys that get into it because I'm not going to do it. It's a difficult job. There's abuses and so on. But I came to admire the people on both sides of the aisle. I think they made an effort to do what's right. Obviously, there's things they should do, but for various political reasons they don't. And you get a little annoyed with them at that. But for the most part, I came to find out they're pretty sincere, most of them. And I remember one guy, politician, coming up to me and said, I can't tell what party you're for, and I felt good about that because if you play both sides and treat them as individuals and that type of thing, and I kind of that's why I think I enjoyed about politics with the personalities involved more than maybe the intricacies of the issues, and sometimes.
You reminded me when I had my newspaper, The Spotlight. I was Republican. Voted Republican, and free enterprise and investment, plant and equipment, etc. And one guy talked to me one day. He said, "Well, how come you're such a Democrat? Why can't you see?"
Yeah.
And he complimented me. He didn't realize it, but those things happen.
And a lot of people, this state, everybody assumes most reporters are Democrat.
Liberal press,
or at least certainly liberal. Most of the ones I've encountered are not. They're more middle of the road. And it's amazing how many of them don't talk about their personal feelings about it.
It must be difficult when you're reporting on the news to keep your personal view out of there.
A little bit, but you just give both sides of the issue. And most of the time there's compelling good sides of all the issue. You can see the pros and cons of it pretty clearly. The Republicans usually worry about the cost of it, and the Democrats say this has been long needed and that kind of thing.
Well, locally, I like Jim Schella. I think he does an excellent job.
Schella does a very good job.
Channel 8, he's been
Norm
over there.
Cox does a good job. He basically, Norm Cox.
Oh, yes.
He succeeded me. And those guys are very important to a station. That's why they stay as long as they do, because they're the go-to people for
They know where the skeletons are.
Yeah. And oftentimes, the beat reporters, a station has to have good beat reporters, and generally the ones that have been there the longest are the beat reporters.
Sure.
Because they do the kind of grunge work, and a lot of reporters don't care about that much or don't like the process of the legislature and that sort of thing.
Well, how did you blend that away from that harsh arena, so to speak?
I think what happened was, with politics, sometimes you can have fun with it. Maybe you go to a convention and some of the silliness at a convention. And they sent me to New York to cover the Democratic convention in 1976, I believe it was. Jimmy Carter was nominated.
You're doing live on the scene?
No, we were just covering the Indiana delegation.
I see.
So all the stations sent reporters to that. And political conventions are very hard to cover because you can't be on the floor the whole time. You can only be there a half hour at a time because there's so many reporters. And it's usually in a hockey arena, so it's just an indoor basketball hockey arena, so it's really jammed and hard to get around, literally hard to get around. But I did a lot of sides, usually doing kind of features kind of stories, and sometimes I had fun with it. And they liked the humor I threw into some of the stories where it was appropriate. And they decided, well, maybe I wonder if we could have him doing that on a regular basis, feature stories. So we did this Duffy's World. And that took off pretty well. I was able to have a lot of independence and do straight humor, commentary.
Now, what did you call that show?
Duffy's World.
World. I don't know. I don't know that I remember that. It was before Duffy's Diner.
Yeah, well, I did that every day practically. The segments I did came under the rubric of Duffy's World.
Okay.
Then Duffy's Diner was just a segment that I did once a week.
So
I didn't do restaurant reviews as a full-time gig. It was just a part of what I did. It was just a weekly segment. And then during the week, I did regular feature stories. And it's usually the stories that you put at the end, the kind of kicker kind of things after we've depressed everybody for the first, before they get sent on their way. Then I would come on and lighten things up, maybe do a fun bit or something silly, a silly commentary. So I built up a reputation for that. And then the Duffy's Diner thing just added to it because of the uniqueness of the story.
It's a tough business today when they do an hour and a half of news, 5 to 6:30. Then the national news comes on. And of course, there's a lot of repetition, but I understand somebody didn't get on at 5 o'clock, but they got on at 6 o'clock.
That's the whole point of it. They call it broadcast points. So you get the people that are home by 5 o'clock, that's maybe a school teacher, guys that work in the certain factory shifts that get them off earlier, students, that sort of thing. And then you get the people that get home at 6, you know, and they kind of wanted, you know, the theory is they want the hits, runs, and errors of the day. And eventually the features kind of went out the window a little bit. You know, they do a lot of investigative type of stuff, but a lot of emphasis on weather now these days.
Today, Reid Duffy is available as a master of ceremonies, as an after-dinner speaker, and if someone would wish to contact you, how would they do that?
I guess my name's in the phone book.
Okay.
And so a lot of people call me I'm probably the only reporter in the history of Indianapolis television that kept his name in the phone book the whole time. And nobody abused it too much. This one doctor used to call me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I guess he got up at 4 and never dawned on anybody else to be up. He'd call me, an older gentleman would call me up and ask me about a restaurant, you know, but I rarely got abused with that, but everybody was always surprised I kept my name in the phone book. And my email is Reid Duffy, all one word, at yahoo.com. With
Reid Duffy
Reid
at
spelled R-E-I-D. So I do something. I don't make a big deal out of it, but people call me up sometimes to
Reid does
speak.
He's built quite a reputation as a master of ceremonies. There's an old timers club in Indianapolis.
Well, that's the great stag events. Yeah.
Once a year, and it's a fundraiser, and the proceeds go to maybe old athletes down in the luck, etc. But Reid does a sports update, and I'll tell you that's worth the price of going to, because he just, I don't want to say he's sacrilegious, but you got to have a thick skin if you are in the area and become a target of one of his arrows, and he does a marvelous job.
We have a lot of fun with that. Leo Barnhorst, who was a famous athlete at Notre Dame in the 40s as a basketball player, also played for the Indianapolis
Kotskis,
yes. And the early days of pro basketball, and later very prominent in the insurance industry here. And he lined me up to do this old-timers thing. It had been going on since what?
50s, early 50s, inroads in the basement.
Yeah. And they were looking for just an MC. And when we were talking about Notre Dame so much. He was very prominent in the athletic aspects of Notre Dame. And for some reason, I got it in my thick head that it was a Notre Dame function. So the very first one I did almost all Notre Dame-oriented humor. And people say, why did you talk about Notre Dame the whole day? And if I'm looking at the program, I said, God, this isn't a Notre Dame thing. You know, I just did. He told me about the old timers, but I thought it was Notre Dame old timers.
Oh, okay.
Because we were talking so much about Notre Dame, and as Notre Damers do. And then finally, I got a fix on it better. But I've been doing it about 32 years.
Really?
The only time I missed, I think they had Doug Sanders, the golfer, and they had changed the date to accommodate him, and I couldn't go on that particular date. But
well, I've been going to them probably for 32 years.
Well, it's like everybody's high school reunion, and it's good they got a lot of younger guys there now, but they get huge crowds for that thing, about 800.
Oh yeah, and every year the athletes, we get to be better athletes every year.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
Reid, it's really been a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks
we're going to wrap
me.
this thing up. Kent John, I have to give him credit. He is our photographer, director, editor.
I work with Kent at Channel 23. So
that's wonderful.
So I assume this is in focus. You know,
well, we'll find out whenever he gets up through editing this. But you got a lot of good information, a lot of good material, and Reid Duffy, good health, continue, and thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And that's it for now. Thanks for watching.